So it's very interesting for a historian like you to be so fascinated with accountings. So what influenced you?
I mean, that's a funny question because I was not an accountant. And in fact, I was someone who was very bad with money, in particular with wine. And so I think that was the first thing, is that how could someone, I mean, I went to very good schools and, you know, I'm proud of that. And I was so bad with these things. And in fact, it was a point of pride. I had a very traditional education in which money was seen as low. It was, again, good to have, but you never talk about it, and you should never seek it. You should just have it. It was an old way. Yes. And that you should always seek, my family, you know, was seeking what they considered to be higher goals in life, religious or learning or these kinds of things, and you didn't deal with money. And so I was always taught that. When you go out with your friends, you buy the best things for them and you don't count. But that doesn't work. You find yourself without any money. That's the first thing. So I found out the hard way, okay, by running out of money, which wasn't any fun. That's the first thing. The second thing is historically, I'm interested in the things that people overlook. So people are interested in how the state works, and there are all these historians of politics. I studied with the greatest historians of politics in the world, and they never thought about accounting. Even the economic historians didn't think about accounting. They always relegated it to a background role. But the people in my book did not. Jean-Baptiste Colbert, Cosimo de' Medici, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, I mean, Robert Walpole, the most important figures of history who were building nations, they were obsessed with accounting. They knew it was essential. Benjamin Franklin knew that to create a new nation, people would need to know accounting. And in fact, he recommended hiring Dutch men because the Dutch men's wives also knew how to do accounting, and they could also read. And he said, so if you hire a Dutch man, you also get a Dutch woman, and she can also do financial management. So you have two skilled people instead of one. So these huge figures from history gave me the evidence that they thought it was important and that we had forgotten this point. And so one of the things I learned is that humans forget very easily the essential things. And that's why history is so important, and we should always be on the lookout for the things that we've forgotten. And these weren't little things, these are huge figures from history. The kings of Spain, the emperors of the Spanish Empire, all these famous monarchs in Europe who were creating these ultra-modern states, they thought accounting was very, very important. Why weren't we as historians talking about it? Because we forgot. That's why. So the job of the historian is to bring these things forward and make sure that we still remember them.
So what do you think during your pursuit and learning about accountants, what do you think you gained the most from it?
Well, I mean, I gained this basic knowledge of accounting, but I also gained this understanding of how states work. You know, now I have a funny role as a historian. I've been able to travel and work with some world leaders on accounting issues in states. I've worked with the Greek Prime Minister. I've worked a little bit with the Portuguese government, not with enormous success. Also with the European community, but also with accounting leaders. And people don't know who they are, and they should know who these accounting leaders are. And one of the things I can do, even as someone who's not an expert in accounting, but someone who knows accounting history, is I can go into a state and I can look at the state and I can say, are you on the right track? And that is a skill that I've learned from accounting, which I think is quite interesting, because I've learned how states work as organisms, and that one of the central organs that you need in the living organism of the state is good accounting if the state is to be sustainable and prosperous.
Let's return back to individuals. For young people who don't know anything about accounting, like I mentioned before, what are the three, like, the most useful or important advice you would give them to start?
I mean, this is the problem, is they have to go out and pay for the accounting lessons. It's kind of like the 16th or 17th century. I mean, when a merchant in Germany wanted to learn accounting in the 16th century, they had to go to Venice. Yes. And there was a building, which is now, or was a Benetton store, it's still there, and it was called basically the German Foundation. And the Germans would go there and they would learn accounting in Venice and they'd go back to their cities. The Spanish would do the same thing. They didn't have many accountants, so it cost money. I believe that public schools should be teaching this immediately to children so that everyone can do basic, what I say, home economics. They can run their house well so they don't get into debt, or they understand what they're spending on. For example, buying a house, again, is not, you buy the house, but there are all these other things involved with it. Or you take a mortgage, a loan to buy a house. It's a very complicated thing. You should understand it. So what can young people do? I mean, if they don't have the money to learn it, if they're good at mathematics, they can teach themselves, I think. But having a good accounting teacher is very important. At USC, we have great accounting teachers, and one of my colleagues is, as a gift to me, teaching my daughter's accounting. I'm very touched by this. So for me, I have this advantage. This is a huge privilege, I think. But for young people, I think they have to be aware of this. There's not one young person who wants to, I don't know, do well in life, they should all be aware of this. And they should be asking from their government and from their schools to be taught these things. Because even in the finest schools, they're not teaching this. Even people who go to business schools sometimes don't learn accounting. That's crazy. Can you imagine that there are people that get MBAs from the greatest schools in the United States and don't know how to do accounting, which means they cannot audit the books of their own company. So this is a problem, not just for normal people, but also for businesses.
So you've been studying historical figures, their accountabilities, and how these affect history and a country's, how it's doing well or bad. So what do you think about Trump's accountability?
Trump is completely unaccountable. He didn't give his tax returns. Can you imagine here a president who had both hundreds of millions of dollars, but also hundreds of millions in dollars of debt? And let's say that debt was held by a big country nearby. Wouldn't it be important to know that? To know what your leader, whom your leader owed money to, and where your leader's wealth was? You'd need to know that because they would work in their interest. The tradition of the United States is that the leader, the president, always has their books open to the citizens. And in fact, George Washington, after the American Revolution, people were upset with him. He wasn't loved by everybody. And he had spent a lot of money during the war actually on wine, on Madeira, on blueberries, on lots of different foodstuffs and on nice tablecloths and on very fine eating. And they asked the Congress, and the foes of General Washington asked for his account books. And he wrote a handwritten note saying, yes, this is a republic. And in a republic, the leader of the republic has to show their accounts. So here are my accounts. And he set that standard by which the leader of the country is the country and therefore cannot have these financial secrets from the country. I think that's very clear that in a democracy, your leader has to show their finances because their interests are there. And these aren't just international interests, they're interests in the country. Let's say that your president owed a business person here $50 million. What do you think that would mean for their policies? Wouldn't that affect how people would consider that candidate for being president or in the National Assembly or Congress, anywhere, right? This transparency is essential to open, democratic, prosperous, sustainable society. Trump does not believe in that at all, and so there you have it. I don't think I need to say much more than that.
And his accountability doesn't sound very good or beneficial for the country.
No. He's gone bankrupt several times. Most of his funding has come, huge amount has come from Russia. Openly, people who are in the Russian mafia, you just have to Google Trump Tower in New York to see him cutting the ribbon. The money was paid for by people who are involved openly with the Russian mafia. Does this mean that there's a plot with Russia? We don't know. But it does mean that he owes money to people from Russia who are very shady. Yes. So is he completely independent? We can't know. We have to take him at his word. And as we know, his word is shaky.
Yes.
to say it very politely. So no, this is a huge issue, I think, for the United States. More so, well, no, I think it's a huge issue. And I'm disappointed in Americans that they accept that their president keeps so many secrets. We have a part of our Constitution called the Emoluments Clause, which means that the president has to show any business interests with foreign countries so that those foreign monarchies or governments will not have influence over the government and the president. This is absolutely essential, so it's fundamental to the well-being of any nation state, and for that you have to open your tax records and your books. I think it's very disturbing that Americans don't find that to be essential. They have, in some ways, given up, and they've gone back to an absolute monarch like Louis XIV, who shredded his books, got rid of them, because he didn't want anyone to know how badly he was managing the state money.